Now, a lot of times I'll get people that'll drop me an email and go, hey, Aaron, I want an engine with about 450 horsepower or 800 horsepower, 900 horsepower, but I'm not going to race it. I just want it for the street. Horsepower and torque is horsepower and torque. The engine doesn't have eyes. It doesn't have a brain. It doesn't know where it's at. So full throttle is full throttle. If you're on the street getting on a freeway and you got your pedal to the floor, you might as well be on a racetrack. So yeah, if you're going to give it full throttle, you are racing the car. And here's worse yet. A race engine at the track is a lot different than a street engine. A street engine has got to drive around, cruise around. It's got to do burnouts. It's got to get more abused than what a race engine does because you're doing burnouts in uncontrolled areas. Sometimes there's gravel, sometimes there's dirt, then you hit pavement. That engine's going from unloaded to loaded to unloaded to loaded. Then you expect it to drive home again or go on a cruise. A race engine gets trailered to the track. It comes off the trailer, you light it up, you warm it up, you hit the burnout box, which is a controlled area, you go stage the thing, you run it for 8-9 seconds down the track, and then you bring it back and shut it off, and it doesn't have to drive back home. Guys that say, hey, I'm not going to race it, but I want like 500 horsepower, 600 horsepower, or 900 or 1,000, doesn't matter what it is. If you're going to give it full throttle, you're racing it. It had better be built strong enough to withstand the kind of power it's making, or just like a cheap wrench that I showed you, it's going to break. Is a broken motor worth it? No, of course not. That's your hard-earned money in there. So you want to put your money in smart places. Even if you can't afford a great engine, at least build the bottom end as strong as you can. Put a good crank in it, good bearings, do some great machining on it, because machining makes a big difference, especially in quality machining compared to someone that's just assembly line punching them out. You want to put good pistons in it, good rings. You want to be sure they're the right type of rings. You want to be sure the clearances are correct for what you're doing. And that has a big factor in it also. I specialize in blowers and nitrous. I do a lot of blower and nitrous motors. In fact, I do a lot of them that are blown and nitrous, where you got 1 or 2 nitrous systems on top of a blower when you're talking 1,500 to 2,000 plus horsepower. You have to have the components and the clearances and the cam profile and everything else inside the motor set up for that. You can't just build a performance motor and put that stuff on, because horsepower makes heat. Heat expands metal. Metal's got to have a place to go. If the clearances aren't enough inside the engine, there ain't no place for the metal to go when it expands. So you seize the thing up, and then you go, oh, that thing was crappy. It wasn't crappy. It went through the wrong types of vigors and loads for the amount of clearances and stuff that it had in it. If it flat out fails, like you rip a wrist pin out of a piston or you spin a rod bearing or something like that, it means the parts weren't strong enough or were inferior to withstand the kind of power it's making. You don't want to be in that scenario. I don't build cheap engines. And I do get calls sometimes, hey, can you just put something together for me? I really don't want, something real fancy. Well, that's like going to a painter and going, hey, I don't want one of your great paint jobs. I want a crappy paint job on my car. No painter's going to paint your car with a crappy paint job. Just like a true pro engine builder like myself, I'm not going to build a crappy engine with my name on it and have it out there, because someone's going to see you in that thing with that crappy engine that you and I know is crappy, but someone else doesn't, and you go doing a burnout down the street and lunge that engine, everybody knows, oh, Aaron built that motor. That came from badass racing or badass cars. Oh, that thing took a crap on him. No, I can't have that out there with my reputation on it. Not going to happen. So I either build them right or I don't build them at all. And trust me, I send a lot of people down the road because I won't touch what they want to build. If you want to build it right, I'm the guy. If you're looking for a cheap, crappy engine, I'm not your guy. Now, as far as prices go, I can't just blurt out a price. Everybody calls me, hey man, I need a price on a 350 around 400 horsepower. I don't know what you want on it. This typical carburetor right here is a quick fuel. That's a $650 carburetor. Do you want one of these, or do you want a little Holly, like a $300 750 vacuum secondary or 600, or do you want an Edelbrock carburetor on it? On a distributor, hey, do you want an MSD like this, or do you want just a stock distributor? Same thing with cylinder heads. These are AFR heads. These are Edelbrock heads. There's so much price difference between the two because these are fully CNC'd. These are just as cast out of the box. So it just depends on the components. There's no magic wand I can wave over an engine and make it cheaper. Parts cost what they cost, and they're not cheap. Performance parts, just like really good high-quality tools, like a snap-on tool like this, are expensive. You can't find good quality, cheap wrenches, just like you're not going to buy good quality, cheap engines. Parts just cost what they cost. So you have to consider what you want on the engine, because some of these components, the March pulleys and the brackets and stuff, those are a hell of a lot more expensive than just painted pulleys and stuff. You can have $600, $700, $800 just in pulleys and brackets. So when you're looking at an engine and you go, well, I have, $4,000 to spend. Okay, I can build you a stock engine, a little above stock with some strong components in it, but you're not getting all this kind of stuff. You got $650. You got a $400 distributor for a self-contained distributor like this. You got $600 or $700 worth of pulleys and belts and brackets on here. A $250 water pump. You got a lot of stuff like that on the outside of an engine. $150 set of valve covers. Even billet breathers like this. They're $45, $50 a piece. So you start looking at the outside components. If you want like a turnkey engine or something, you're talking there could be $1,500 to $2,000 worth of components and stuff on the outside of the motor, let alone the motor itself with the crankshaft. So prices can vary, just like prices can vary on the inside of the motor. A stock crank, you can do one for $150. An aftermarket crank, just a regular steel crank, they're around $300 or $400. A 4340 forged crank, they start at about $700 and they can go to about $1,800, $1,900. When you get into a billet crankshaft, they're $3,000 to $4,000. You got a crankshaft. It makes 0 horsepower difference for what type of crankshaft it is. 0. Just like pistons. A cast piston that makes 12-to-1 compression is going to make exactly the same horsepower in an engine that a high-end, lightweight forged piston is going to make. Huge difference in price. Same amount of horsepower. The difference is the cast piston's going to break. You're going to rip the wrist pin out of it, or when you get detonation or lean out a little bit, you're going to break the piston. A forged piston, like a JE piston or a Ross or Wiseco, that's a very expensive piston. You're talking $800 to $1,000 for a set of high-end race pistons, and you're talking $110 for a set of stock pistons. I can get stock pistons in any compression I want, 13-to-1, 14-to-1, 9-to-1, it doesn't matter. It's still the same. Just like I can get cheap wrenches, like a Walmart wrench, in any size I want. It's still a cheap, crappily made wrench, and this is what's going to happen to it. You're going to break it. So all in all, if you're looking for a price, consider all of this. Consider what you're going to do with the vehicle, how it's going to be driven. Consider you don't buy horsepower, you buy strength. Consider buy quality once, do it right once, and be done with it. And just like I said earlier about magazine ads boasting about ridiculous horsepower numbers for a cheap price, yes, you get what you pay for, but also consider the amount of horsepower that they're making. One is 99% of the time fake. Two, is that horsepower in the RPM range of where you're going to be driving your vehicle? It may make, let's say it makes 500 horsepower. But where is its peak at? What kind of camshaft is in it? What kind of heads are in it and stuff? What kind of compression does it have to where it's going to make that horsepower? I can make a 289 Ford make 500 horsepower, but that thing's going to have to be zinging really, really high in RPM, just like a chainsaw, to make that kind of horsepower. At 2,500 or 3,000 RPM, that little motor's going to fall on its face. It just has no torque. There's not enough crankshaft in it to create enough torque. There's not enough cubic inches. Again, there's no replacement for displacement. So if you're looking for that kind of 500 horsepower, you might consider something like a much larger engine. It's not bigger on the outside, it's bigger on the inside. So yeah, maybe something like this makes 500 horsepower, but it makes it at 4,500 RPM. And at 2,000 RPM, it's making 200 horsepower. A little 289 is not making 200 horsepower right off of an idle. The thing's making 40, 40 or 50. It just doesn't have enough power. So again, going back, it's where it makes its power. This is where a custom-built engine comes in, rather than just a cookie-cutter engine out of a magazine. Every engine has a specific design for a specific need. So you're not just going to buy one off the shelf and say, oh, this is a good all-around engine. So it just depends what your need is and what kind of car you have to what kind of motor we're going to design for you. So just know that you can't get a reputation like this by building crappy motors that fall apart. You got to go by the reputation and how long someone's been in business. I've been doing this for a long time. I'm still in business. I'm highly rated, and I have a worldwide reputation for building badass engines.